Would Mark Thurman, Secretary, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like everybody to take a moment of silence, if we could, in reflection of 9/11. Okay, thank you, everyone. Proceeding with our meeting, Pastor Herrera has an excused absence today. Aaron, could you take a roll call, please?
David Diaz.
Here.
Joan Hancock.
Here.
Pastor Herrera. Matthew Kelly.
Present.
Bob Lamb.
Here.
Ed Lane.
Here.
Jim Miller.
Here.
Lisa Miller-Strunk. Here. John O'Rourke.
Here.
Bruce Rust.
Here.
Frank Shutter.
Here.
Paul Shafino.
Here.
Mark Thurman.
Present.
Done.
Now, will the members of the board, senior staff, and members of the audience please introduce themselves? I'd like to advise the members of the public that identification is voluntary. You're not required. If we could start around the table.
Rick Lopes, Chief of Public Affairs.
John O'Rourke, Board Member.
Matt Kelly, Board Member.
Laura Zuniga, Chief of Legislation.
Lisa Miller-Strunk, Board Member.
Jim Miller, Board Member. Bob Lamb, Board Member.
Cindy Christensen, Chief Deputy Registrar.
Mark Thurman, Board Member.
Paul Shafino, Board Member.
Steve Sands, Registrar.
Joan Hancock, Board Member.
Dave Bowe, Chief of Enforcement. Dave Diaz, Board Member.
Frank Shutter, Board Member.
Ed Lang, Board Member.
Karen Ollinger, Chief of Licensing.
Bruce Rust, Board Member.
Don Chang, Legal Counsel for Civil Affairs.
Mike Franklin, Deputy Attorney General.
Debbie Thompson, Budget Analyst, Contractors. Karen Graham, Contractors.
Clifford Bird, Painting and Decorating Contractors, California.
Amy Cox-Farrell, DCA Information Technology.
Karen Austin, Licensing Division Manager. John Smith, Senate Office of Research.
Richard Markison, representing Western Electrical Contractors and Plumbing, Heating, Cooling Contractors of California.
Jerry Desmond Jr. for Association of California Surety Companies.
Larry Parrott, Board Staff.
Heidi Lutzer-Hill, Chief of Testing, CSLE.
Ted Rieger, Indoor Comfort News.
Larry Rolfus, California Landscape Contractors Association.
Jane Carden, Community. Van West, CSLE Public Affairs. Candace Cohen, CSLE Public Affairs. Ruth Hamler, CSLE Public Affairs.
Derek Nowak, Senator for Public Interest Law, University of San Diego.
Ken Grossbart, Appalachian Grossbart Record.
Rick Piers, Basic Crafts.
Shauna Krause, Capital Services.
Frank Hughes, Public.
Karen Hughes, Public.
Michael Boucher, Public.
Tom Roy, DCA.
Shelley Menzel, DCA.
David Cole, Capital Services.
Anna Rodriguez, Enforcement Staff.
Missy Bickley, Enforcement.
Nicole Wright, CSLE Program.
Michael Lincoln, Board Staff.
Anybody else in the public not to introduce themselves or voluntarily?
And Aaron Eckert, Executive Office.
Hey, there we go. We had one. Thank you, Aaron. The next item on the agenda is chair's remarks and board member comments. Every now and then we have an opportunity as a board to do something kind of fun. And last week we had 25 or so delegates from China come over to hear how we operate our system in construction. And none of them spoke English, or some slightly broken English. They had an interpreter. And they were here for 2 hours, from 10 to 12. And I think they got a lot out of the discussion. We had a lot of head nodding and lights seemed to be on. But we explained to them how the CSLB licensing works in combination with OSHA and workers' comp. It was a safety-oriented meeting. It seemed to be their biggest interest. And for me, it made me appreciate what we do here as a board and as a society in taking care of and prioritizing the health of our workers. And I think it's something that we do very well compared to other societies. And it really came to the forefront when one of the gentlemen, he said to me, well, what happens if an employee dies? And I said, well, there's an investigation by OSHA, and if the employer is willfully negligent, he could go to jail. It gets referred to the Department of Justice. The CSLB is informed. Licenses can get pulled. Workers' comp insurance rates go up. And he said, no, you don't understand. He said, well, what happens if 10 factory workers die? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, well, in our country, people disappear. And I thought, what a great system we have, because I don't think I'm going to have to disappear, at least. But we do have a good system, and that was their concern, is that they literally do have a wicked employee safety problem in their country, and they're trying to learn from us how to do it right, which I thought was commendable that they saw us to have a model program. Any other board comments? Nope. So we'll keep it moving then. The next item on the agenda is public comment. This agenda item is provided for public comment pertaining to items on the agenda as well as items that are not on the agenda. However, the board cannot take any action on items not listed on the agenda. The CSLB welcomes public comment on any item on the agenda, and it's our intent to ask the public to comment prior to the board taking any action on an agenda item. But if for some reason we forget to ask for public comment on an agenda item, a member of the public wanting to comment on the item should raise their hand and they will be recognized. So don't be shy. Also, we will be limiting public comment to 5 minutes per individual. If you guys could help me with not putting me in a position of saying you have 1 minute left, that would be great. So would be much appreciated. Would any individuals wish to address the board at this time? Please. Please state your name.
Hello? Can you guys hear okay? I tend to speak loud, so. My name is Karen Hughes. My husband, Brian Hughes, is here with me today. I have a brief presentation for the board, probably about 4 to 5 minutes. I will not say anything confidential, and I will not state any specific names of contractors or anything of that nature. We're here today to ask a simple question of the CSLB board members, its enforcement division, and all interested parties. Is the CSLB arbitration program still serving the public's best interests? I'm going to summarize our experience and our knowledge of what happened to us in a CSLB arbitration, new facts that have recently been discovered, and our understanding regarding Business and Profession Code 7085, shortfalls, and how a contractor or any party to an arbitration currently can commit fraud, perjury, illegally during an arbitration without any discipline or recourse taken as of today. In February 2012, my husband asked of the CSLB enforcement and its attorney, is a contractor legally required to follow the law during an arbitration? Well, the short answer, yes, absolutely. However, the long answer was the CSLB cannot discipline a contractor for the same bad act, the complaint, the issue, twice. Also, if the Superior Court will not overturn a CSLB arbitration award, then the Attorney General's office would likely not investigate or even pursue a contractor for fraud, perjury, or any bad act conducted during the CSLB arbitration, regardless of the facts and the evidence that's provided to them. Nothing bad happens to the contractor or anybody that commits an illegal act. Just so that every CSLB board member and attendee of this meeting knows, Sacramento Superior Court, as with many other civil courts, will not look at any evidence presented during the arbitration or review facts or evidence of fraud or any errors in law that an arbitrator may have made during that arbitration. This is a discretionary privilege of making all decisions final, regarding CSLB arbitrations, particularly binding arbitrations. Thereby, this inadvertently legalizes any illegal activity that's committed during a CSLB arbitration. In our petition to vacate a CSLB award in Superior Court, there were more than a dozen blatant and obvious errors of work not performed, double billing, and items that don't exist in our home today, all of which proof was provided. And of all these factual errors, the contractor and its counsel never denied the validity of the estimate. The estimate that he provided was not even the house that he built. This means now we pay for materials that don't exist and for work that was not performed. Earlier this year at a CSLB board meeting, I've seen many of you before, we presented several suggested policy changes and forwarded our entire list of suggestions, there was about 13 in total, to CSLB enforcement. If implemented as policy, these suggestions would at least prevent what happened to us or any future consumer from falling into the same trap of an unscrupulous contractor during a CSLB arbitration, and it would deter fraudulent activity from occurring. What we were told by the CSLB enforcement in May of this year is that in order to implement our suggestions, most of which were agreed with, they would have to shut down the current arbitration program and implement a new one under a new contract. We were told the current arbitration agency does not have to follow any suggestions or requests of the CSLB regarding any new policies or rules of engagement. Further, it wasn't the CSLB's policy to tell the arbitration agency how to conduct its business. As a result of that meeting, we're now in the process of making suggested language changes to BMP Code 7085. Some of you have already seen those suggestions to assure the public a safe and just arbitration for all that use it, including contractors. What ties all this together is a recent discovered fact regarding our current civil lawsuit that we've yet to discuss with the CSLB. On December 7th of 2011, we attended our CSLB arbitration. Under oath, the arbitrator stated that he had no prior knowledge of our contractor or its representative that day. He stated he had some business relations with the expert witness. And then he stated he thought he might know their attorney. But the truth? On or about May 11th, 2009, approximately 2.5 years prior, the CSLB facilitated another arbitration for that same contractor, that same attorney. I have the case number and the complaint number. The same arbitrator who was chosen for us by the arbitration agency was also the residing arbitrator for that arbitration. This was also from the same CSLB contracted arbitration agency that just conducted our arbitration. The same agency caseworker worked the prior case as well as ours. All this just 2.5 years prior. So of all the arbitrators that the CSLB allows to hear their cases through the arbitration agency, we find it odd that this is the only arbitrator that can hear our contractors' arbitrations. The arbitrator who we've discussed with CSLB enforcement, in our opinion, number one, the arbitrator committed perjury in the arbitration, in addition to the contractor himself. Number two, the arbitrator blindly accepted the contractor's estimate that had over a dozen factual errors. Number three, the arbitrator accepted an estimate that included work not performed and materials that don't exist in our home, in excess of $50,000 worth of factual errors. Number four, the arbitrator knew the contractor. Number five, the arbitrator knew the contractor's expert witnesses. Number six, the arbitrator knew the attorney. Number seven, the arbitrator presided over a prior CSLB arbitration with the same contractor just 2.5 years ago. That arbitrator decided that we have to pay for materials that don't exist in our home and for work that was never performed. This seems to be a very serious conflict of interest excuse me, in determining a fair and just CSLB arbitration award. With what happened in our case, it would seem to the public that maybe a contractor or its counsel can just call the CSLB arbitration company and pick an arbitrator of their choice. Are we to believe that we're just the most unlucky consumers on the planet, and that day, all the planets lined up, the contractor just happened to get their favorite guy who was willing to commit perjury and who knows what else in December of 2011. It is the current arbitration agency's policy to disclose any arbitrator's prior knowledge of attending parties prior to the arbitration. This is also in the language of BMP 7085, so that somebody like a consumer has the chance to object to selected choices for the arbitrator before the actual arbitration. In violation of that policy, we were informed the day of the arbitration, and we're only told half the truth of what our arbitrator really knew and what his prior dealings were with the contractor and its counsel. He said nothing about knowing the contractor or the arbitration that he presided for over that same contractor just 2.5 years prior. If we would have known prior to the arbitration that the arbitrator knew the contractor and his attorney because he presided over a CSLB prior arbitration, with that same contractor, had a business relationship with the expert witness, this arbitrator, who was chosen for us, would not have been our arbitrator that day. Had the rules been followed according to BMP 7085, the arbitration company, and the CSLB arbitration program, we would not be here today telling you about our arbitration nightmare and the policies that were clearly not followed and violated, including the illegal activities that occurred during our arbitration. With all this in mind, does the board member staff, do you really think we could have had a fair arbitration under these circumstances? Are we really being unreasonable and questioning all the policies and the rules that are in place? Do you think the public thinks this is unreasonable? Unfortunately, this new evidence for us was discovered a little bit too late. We don't have recourse with Superior Court, nor do we have the resources to fight this erroneous decision any further. So for us, that day has come and gone. But we look at it this way. Perhaps it's our fate to push forward, make any necessary changes to the arbitration process, and to make any changes to BMP 7085. To avoid this from happening to future consumers or anybody, contractors in the future in an arbitration process. So, I ask again, does the CSLB program, the arbitration program specifically, as it stands today, does it really serve the public's best interest when such obvious conflicts of interest and potential illegal activities can occur? No. We need to make some changes. One last thing. We find it hard to believe that as a regulatory agency, the CSLB, you protect the public and the consumer. You often facilitate sting operations on unlicensed contractors and investigations of contractor fraudulent activity in the field, many of which are covered by media coverage. That the agency, from what we have seen, we don't know for sure, has not been interested in investigating illegal activity like fraud and perjury that occurred in its own arbitration program that the CSLB is paying for. I seriously hope that all this can change in the future. I'm going to give you all my contact information. Brian has a couple things that he's going to hand out. We just want to give everybody a copy of our suggested language to BMP 7085 so that you all have it to review. Our policy suggested changes, which is the 13 items that I mentioned. And we hope that everyone on the panel today takes this seriously, will take a look at it, hopefully follow up with us, and support most, if not all of our changes, to the arbitration program as well as BMP 7085. These changes can help assure that the public is afforded a CSLB arbitration that's fair and impartial. That's for both consumers and for contractors in resolving disputes in the future. So in closing, we look forward to working with the CSLB for changes on policies in BMP 7085 and its arbitration program. And we hope this will spark a real debate between the CSLB and the necessity to implement some changes very, very soon. So we thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. And if there's any questions, my contact information, we'd be happy to answer anything from anybody.
Ms. Hughes, thank you for coming before the board. We do realize that you're here for the benefit of the system. At this point, you've played your course in the courts and with arbitration. So you're not here to fix your situation. You're here to fix other people's.
That's
and
correct.
that's a great thing. We love to have people come to try and help the system. You and I had a discussion. I explained that with budget resources that we're limited in what we can do with legislation right now, but that's not to invalidate the efforts you're making. I think they're wonderful. Implore you to contact the senators that we discussed. I think it's a great avenue, and you should full speed ahead. All right. Is there anyone else from the public that'd like to address the board? Okay. Public comment session's closed.
I've just got to ask one quick question. Based on everything that was said, and I'm sure you folks are probably more familiar with it than I am, is there nothing that we can do internally to try and remedy some of the problems that she cited?
Well, here's the gist of the situation. The problems that she cited, initially a lot of it dealt with her situation, which obviously that's played its course. So the answer to that is no. We can't change what's already played its course out in the system. However, to change the arbitration program itself and address that, that is something that Dave can probably address, that we are looking at some of the items she has on there, and you know, we don't have an infallible system in arbitration, and I think Dave is pursuing that.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other comments from the board? Okay. The next item on the agenda, review and approval of the June 5 and July 25, 2012 board meeting minutes. If the board's amenable, perhaps we can do these together. Do any board members have any comments or questions regarding the minutes from those two board meetings?
Motion to approve is read as mailed.
Second.
All in favor, say aye, please. Aye. Opposed? Motion approved. The next item on the agenda is the Enforcement Committee report. Enforcement Chair Dave Diaz and Enforcement Chief Dave Fote will give us the Enforcement Committee report.
Okay. Everybody ready? Okay. First of all, I want to show my appreciation for the Enforcement Division's continued partnering with state and local agencies as well as industry partners to oversee public works projects. Specifically, Enforcement is working with Employment Development Department to address licensees that have outstanding payroll tax liabilities, and routinely partners with the Department of Insurance to address contractors, both licensed and unlicensed, that fail to maintain workers' compensation for the employees. Division of Labor Standards and Enforcement staff regularly partner with SWIFT staff, and recently they responded to a lead that I convened on behalf of the sheet metal workers regarding Bosco Group, an unlicensed contractor that was working at Sacramento area Walmart. Bosco Group was issued a stop order and citations by the DLSE totaling $14,500 for failure to maintain workers' compensation insurance for employees and unlicensed activity. And SWIFT issued a citation for unlicensed contracting and misuse of licensing number totaling $15,000. Another result of the joint action was that Bosco Group lost other subcontractors for public works in Sacramento, Lincoln, Stockton, and Southern California. The unlicensed lead was a direct result of the outstanding work from Public Works unit as they speak with field representative prior to a complaint being filed to discuss potential violations and the evidence required to support formal disciplinary action. That early communication has dramatically improved the quality of complaints filed by industry partners to include documentation that clearly supports alleged allegations or violations. So our public works staff have been aggressive in disciplining contractors that violate the Subcontracting, Subletting, Fair Practices Act, Labor Code, Contractors License Law, and they have established remarkable working relationships with sheet metal workers, Foundations for Fair Contracting, Work Preservation Fund, Northern California Electrical Contractors, industry, and other industry partners. David Fote, Chief of Enforcement, will provide the enforcement program update.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz. If we could turn to page 1 in the packet under the enforcement section. Just a real quick update on our vacancies. We currently have 13 vacancies, which is rather low for the enforcement division. But what is not depicted here are the illnesses that staff have incurred in the San Bernardino Investigative Center. We're hoping that we can hire some permanent intermittent employees to assist us with the workload, which is continuing to increase in certain areas in Southern California. On page 2, we have an update on our quest to fill our peace officer positions. I would like to thank Paul Schaffino, Lisa Miller, and Bob Lamb for taking time out of their day to swear in these 4 peace officers, Manya, Vicky, Bernard, and Jim. Vicky was the supervisor of our San Diego office, and she took a demotion to a senior investigator to become the peace officer. I mention her because she has started the academy in Mira Mesa. It's a 26-week police academy. It was kind of interesting to see the list of the recruits. You have sheriff, police, and contractor state license board with one person. So kind of really stood out. There's 72 in the class. She's doing well. In fact, she's been hitting 100% on her exams, so we're very pleased about that. Manya was a special agent at DOJ. She doesn't have to go through the academy, but Bernard and Jim are set to attend the State Peace Officer Academy in October. On page 3, I wanted to highlight our efforts to resolve consumer complaints internally through our negotiation and mediation program. You'll see over a 90-day period, we were successful in returning over $2 million to injured parties. Our consumer services representatives, and they're the first ones that receive the complaints, are focused on, one, trying to settle it, but also looking at other violations that have a huge impact on public safety. And one of those violations is the failure to obtain a building permit. So we've included 2 highlights, and one was kind of interesting in that a contractor was dumping debris on his neighbor's yard, and she had gone to you'll see the fire department, other county officials, even to ABC 30 Action News without success to get this to stop. Once she filed a complaint with the CSLB, we were able to convince the contractor that the board takes permit violations very seriously. In fact, you could have your license revoked, and that illegal dumping did cease. The second one is a policy that we've implemented. Many of you were on the board when you adopted what's really a zero-tolerance policy for permit violations, meaning if we receive a complaint at the Intake Mediation Center that relates to a failure to get a permit, the contractor needs to go out, obtain the permit, and do whatever work is necessary to comply with code requirements. And in this situation, they had to comply with the Virginia Graham-Baker law that requires what is, I think, the second drain, or the drain that's needed to stop a child from drowning. So the contractor not only had to pay for the replacement of the water, but the installation of the drain. On page 4, our CSRs are looking into the workers' comp. These consumers list the names of the employees often on the complaint form. We know they have employees, yet we have an exemption from workers' comp on file. So since we started this program April of 2011, we found 547 contractors that had an exemption on file with employees. We were able to obtain 179 new workers' comp policies. We suspended 47 licenses and made another approximately 100 referrals to partnering state agencies. This program is working well as we partner with EDD. The chances are, if you have employees, you don't have any workers' comp for them, you're not withholding any payroll taxes. And the final update for the Intake Mediation Center is the telephone disconnect program. And you'll see that we have now disconnected 68 telephones, and the board objective for last year was to do 50, so we've exceeded that. It's not quite as successful as we would have hoped, because the way things work today, a lot of these unlicensed contractors, they have the disposable phones. They change their phone numbers, and so we're only looking to disconnect those that relate to a yellow page ad or more of a fixed phone number. On page 5, we have consolidated our central SWIFT unit with our Fresno Investigative Center. The supervisor retired, and the SWIFT supervisor is just an outstanding supervisor, and she's able to supervise both units. And we were able to move the staff into the new location. They're up here today for some training, and I was talking to them about this, and they just couldn't be more pleased with the new facility and how well things are working. And so for our excellent Fresno board member, we're glad to see that we're providing a high level of service. On the bottom of the page, just a highlight about settling cases, you'll see that they don't obtain the same amount of restitution. That being the investigators don't achieve the same amount of restitution as the CSRs, but they still look at ways to resolve complaints, make parties whole. And during that 3-month period, over $848,000 was recovered. On page 6, we have what we call the furnace investigation, and it was something that took a lot of our resources. We've worked very closely in Monterey County, and what we did is we were able to combine the consumer harm that was occurring by these two, this husband and wife, with the tax avoidance, the failure to obtain workers' comp. And we're looking at getting, hopefully, a multi-year state prison sentence. That's my understanding. They're going to be sentenced, I believe it's later this month. But that was a successful case. I believe the sentencing date is September the 22nd. It took a lot of our resource, took a dedication to make that happen. We look at that as being a success. We got a lot of good positive media coverage out of it. Now, the next one is not quite as successful, and that was Service Master. And this, I just wanted to highlight this because this is an area that we may want to focus more on the next year. If you go home, and hopefully this wouldn't happen to you, your house floods or your house burns down, you're going to be contacted by public adjusters and others that want to help you with the insurance claim. And what's happening in the industry is that these contractors are asking you to give them power of attorney. And if you look at what Service Master was doing, they engaged in over $10 million in forgeries. They're obtaining power of attorney. They're representing you with the insurance company. They're really defrauding the insurance company. They're getting paid for work they're not doing. And what's most troubling of all is they're getting up to 100% of the money up front. So that insured is in a compromised position. And they're very reluctant to participate in our investigations. This was another huge investigation that we did with the Department of Insurance. And when I talked to the supervisor this morning about where we're at with this, well, we got a plea out of them, but no one's gone to jail. They paid some restitution to the workers' comp carrier, but these consumers haven't been made whole. And so what we're doing is we've spun off a number of our investigations to the elder abuse unit down in San Bernardino County. But clearly we need to find a more effective way to deal with this problem. And I think one way to do that is to provide training to these service and repair contractors, and they have trainers that do this. Many of you know Josh Grumenbaum has attended board meetings, so we need to set that training up, and we're going to need to focus on this industry and protect these consumers. And with that, on page 8, Mr. Diaz discussed the Public Works program and the success we're having. I would just add to it, since the implementation of this unit in June of 2010, we've issued 31 citations, we've had 19 accusations, 2 criminal filings, and revoked 9 licenses. It's working very well with very limited CSLB resources. We have 1 full-time employee working this and 1 retired annuitant that are putting up these numbers. And it really works because of the close working relationship we've developed with our industry partners. They'll routinely call and tell us what type of violation they think that has occurred, and we'll often tell them that while that may be a violation, it's not the CSLB's jurisdiction. You need to go elsewhere. And so we don't have to open that case. There's no unreal expectations. But if we think there's a violation, we tell them what evidence we need, and for the most part, they go out and get it. So we're very pleased with that. On page 10, just our complaint handling statistics. The enforcement staff have continued to meet or achieve or exceed board expectations as it relates to individual production goals, our cycle time, our settlement ratios. And you'll see that our caseload is well within our ability. It's well under what we have the capability of handling at this time. And that allows us to look at some of these other issues that we already talked about, like workers' comp and permit compliance. On page 12, As far as our proactive enforcement, there were two changes that were made in the last year. One, we're looking at these contractors that are continuing to advertise illegally and warning them. As you saw, we're disconnecting phones. We investigated over 1,000 of them in our intake mediation center. But for those that want to continue to violate the law, they're a sting target. And by focusing more on that area, when we ran our numbers year to date, compared this year to last year, what we found is that we've had a 45% increase in our sting days and a 32% increase in the actions that we've taken. So our proactive enforcement and our partnering with local law enforcement is working extremely well. And another benefit is we typically have employment development department at our sting, so it's triggering an audit. On page 13, a little update on the Labor Enforcement Task Force. When they disbanded or they put new leadership in what was once the Economic Employment Enforcement Coalition, we had meetings with industry groups, and at those meetings we heard that we need to be more focused on our approach, that we needed to be going after the truly bad offenders, and we should be prioritizing those leads that come from our industry partners. And I totaled up the numbers in the chart on the bottom of the page, and what I found is that we performed 886 inspections and had 956 violations, and that really stands out, that we are going after the bad contractors. We're not out there disrupting law-abiding businesses, so I was very pleased to see that. On page 14, we did a rather large operation with the Department of Insurance. We called it Operation Underground. It was a contest for our staff to name this operation. We found 500 contractors that we suspected of contracting. I think they were all licensed without workers' comp for our targets. We warned them. We wanted them to be either willfully uninsured or underinsured, meaning we worked with their insurance carrier to find out if they were reporting any payroll as to pay premiums on the workers' comp. It had some success, as you'll see. We had over 100 legal actions. However, we found it very difficult to find the contractors on job sites. And the Riverside DA's come up with an idea that we think is quite interesting, and that is to find a receptive material supplier and embed either our employee or the Department of Insurance employee behind the counter and talk to these people when they come in to buy materials. So we're in the process of setting that up now. We think that might make it a little bit easier to find them on site. And on page 15, our Craigslist stings. Craigslist has been a problem for quite some time. Rick Loeb's been very active in trying to work with them to do more to protect the public and to perhaps even take off illegal ads. They seem to be still a very good source of sting targets. So we did a series of stings, and we did them in conjunction with 3 other states. And we're looking to do more of that on a national level to really get the word out that you need to be extra careful when you're on an internet site and make sure that who you're dealing with is licensed. I just had that one Friday. I was on a phone call with someone, and I went to Craigslist in Bakersfield, and I found just in the last 3 hours that 17 contractors had posted, and not one of them had a license number. I mean, it was just unbelievable. So there's some effort. We need to do what we can to make sure a license number is included. And just to turn to page 18, we have included the training that we provided during the past year. Bob Lamb really deserves recognition for helping us put this together and getting the input from the staff on the training that they need. Today upstairs we have Module 3 that's being conducted. Mike Franklin is part of that. He's one of the key instructors. I want to thank Mike for going all over the state to provide training to staff. The staff absolutely love the training that Mike's providing because it relates directly to the work they're performing. We have, in the future, we've planned elder abuse training. We want to do more with that. That's one way. If you can couple that perhaps with an economic crime violation, get into the elder abuse unit, I believe we can see more criminal convictions with people that are committing these crimes actually spending time, if not in state prison and in the county jail. We've entered into an agreement with Cooperative Personnel Services to provide training to our supervisors and managers to improve their skills in dealing with staff. And then finally, we work closely with the Department of Consumer Affairs with their Enforcement Academy. And that concludes the enforcement update. Is there any questions? Mr. Kelly.
Dave, on the reduction in workforce and DCA's plan to reduce personnel by 5%, were those individuals dropped off the list of people that are on the front page? Were those vacant positions, I'm asking, like the ones that are on the,
They were positions in addition to the 13 vacancies.
okay, so there was 18 before and now there's 13?
Yes.
Okay. And then on the LETEF, you basically said that it's going after more serious offenders, but still doing much the same work that their EEC was doing, or have things changed significantly?
It's the focus is still the same in that we can go out ourselves and look and take action on an unlicensed contractor, somebody that's out of class, but the focus is more on the contractors that have unsafe work conditions, that are substantially underreporting their employees to EDD, that are engaged in premium insurance fraud. And so the big change between the EEC and the LETF is that we're doing research beforehand. If we get a lead from someone, we're going to call our partners and find out what's being reported. We'll talk to the informant, see what type of work they're doing. And by doing that, especially if you know the size of the job or the amount of material that's being used, it gives you a ratio. You know, that's something that you need to focus on when you get out to that job site. Because remember, when we're going out with our partners, it's a fairly large group. You have the Division of Labor Standards Enforcement, you have EDD, and you have Division of Occupational Safety and Health.
Okay. And just my compliments, it's great to see the comprehensive training that's being offered to our employees.
Thank you.
The next agenda item is review and approval of recommendation regarding the duties required by individuals qualifying an additional individual or firm. Dave, can you give us an overview of that?
Yeah.
Yeah. In your board packet under agenda item E2, you'll find an issue paper written by David in the request of Board Chair Shafino. The issue paper addresses concerns relating to the responsibility of the qualifying individual on a corporate or partnership license. David and Deputy Attorney General Mike Franklin will discuss the recommendations for the board consideration.
Thank you. Just a little background on this. We have become aware that many of our applicants that are applying for a second license do not understand their responsibilities in doing so. There seems to be a misunderstanding as to the responsibilities of an RMO or a qualifying partner. The law is very clear when you're an RME that you have to you're an employee, you've got to work, I think it's 30% of the time. I'm not sure if that's 32?
80%, 32 hours.
All right, 32 hours or 80% of the time. But it's not quite as defined for the qualifier. We even have a situation right now we're dealing with down in the Ventura area where the DA is looking to prosecute personnel on a corporate license as unlicensed contractors because their argument is the qualifier was not actively involved. Clearly, we need to do something. We have the criminal prosecutors are concerned about it. We have civil cases where contractors are finding it difficult to collect when someone's making an argument the qualifier wasn't actively involved. And we have consumers that are being harmed. We can clearly show that we have partnership and corporate licenses that have been issued and the qualifier is not involved, and we've had consumer harm occur because of that. And so what we've done is Karen Ollinger's played a very big part in developing this issue paper, as has Phil Vermeulen representing the industry. And I would ask Mike if you could share some thoughts on the qualifier issue. Mike Franklin.
Thank you. I think the starting point is the code section, which is the pertinent part is listed in here under 7068.1, and that I think sort of illustrates the problem that we're facing. And the language there, it implies and it says it shall be responsible for exercising that direct supervision and control of his or her employer's or principal's construction operations as is necessary to secure full compliance. And what we're seeing in administrative law arena is that when there is a problem, then we can go back and say, well, it's clear that there wasn't enough supervision. But I think what we're hoping to address is how to get to the problem before there's consumer harm. And that, I think, is what is being attempted here in the issues that we're looking at. The few times that I've had cases involving this issue, I found that administrative law judges are willing to make findings against this for someone who clearly has not been active enough to supervise, and that there are problems that exist. But again, I think we're trying to get to a point where we don't have the problems exist, that there's some awareness that the RMO or the qualifier has to be involved before, so that they can ensure that no problems exist. So anyway, these are the attempts that are in this issue paper that we've looked at, and we're open to any other suggestions, I think.
Okay, the recommendations are, number one, distribute information clarifying the duties and responsibilities of the qualifying individual on the CSLB website and in the California Licensed Contractor newsletter. 2, pursue legislation to amend B&P Code Section 7068.1D to provide disciplinary action when a licensee or a qualifier fails to comply with the duties and responsibilities of the qualifying individual certified he or she would perform. 3, establish a task force to identify the scope of the problem, investigate suspect individuals who attempt to qualify multiple licenses to ensure compliance with the qualifier duties and responsibility requirements, and explore legislative and or administrative remedies.
Any questions from the board?
If that's the recommendation, Mr. Chairman, I would move the recommendation if it's necessary.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion so approved. Next item on the agenda is still enforcement review of the 2011 Consumer Satisfaction Survey. Heidi?
Good afternoon. In your packet, it's under agenda item E3, is the 2011 Consumer Satisfaction Survey. And this is the results from the calendar year 2011 Consumer Satisfaction Survey that we do every year. Consumers who provide the CSLB with their email addresses are sent the survey in the month after the complaint is closed. The survey consists of 8 questions. Those questions are on the second page of the report in Table 1. So the questions consist of: CSLB contacted me promptly after I filed my complaint. Procedures for investigating my complaint were clearly explained to me. CSLB kept me informed of my case's progress. I was treated courteously. My complaint was processed in a timely manner. I understand the outcome of the investigation, whether or not I agree with the action taken, and the action taken in my case was appropriate, and I'm satisfied with the service provided by the CSLB. And we always present the data in comparison to the last 4 years, and as you can see from that table, results for the 2011 show an increase from 2010 in all 8 categories. We're very happy to see that. And typically the data fluctuates up and down by a few percentage points. It's usually very stable. However, in 2011, 2 of the questions had ratings up 6%, and 3 questions had ratings up 4%. And the ratings for all the questions except for question 7, they're all the highest they've been in the last 10 years. So good job, David. So whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And I always try to ask David, what have you been, when the numbers go up, I say, what have you been doing that accounts for this? And as you can see by his report, they're doing so many different things in enforcement, it's hard to point out what might be responsible for these ratings going up. And but one thing I can tell you that is not the reason, typically we see a positive response bias in this kind of data, meaning that people whose cases are closed in their favor tend to be more likely to fill out the survey and say, yeah, I really like CSLB because my case came out well. And typically we see that more people who had a positive outcome respond to the survey. However, this year, the 2011, that was not the case. We actually had, there were 59% of the complaints were categorized as closed in favor of the consumer, but only 52% of the survey responses came from that group. So that means is this data is not biased toward the positive, so it's showing that there is some consumers really are more satisfied with the service that we're providing in these areas that we're measuring. So that's good news. And it may have to do with consumer expectations in this time, that maybe consumers perceive that we can't do as much when we're having budget issues and staffing issues, and that they're pleasantly surprised that we are, doing a good job. That could, or it could be just we're doing a lot of things differently and more efficiently, and we're handling their cases very well. So, is there any questions?
The chair recognizes Matt Kelly.
Mr. Chairman, through the chair, is there any historical data on question number 9, which was, did the respondent check the contractor's license status? That's 43, 53, and 4% no response. I was wondering. Any historical data on question number 9?
Yes, we've included that in the survey. Let's see, if you look in the report, it should give you the results from previous years. On page 6.
Okay.
So in 2010, 45% said yes, 49% said no.
Okay. Thank you. And I know that Board Member Kirkbride took great interest in this report. Maybe we could email it to her, or the results or something. I'd be glad to, Mr. Kelly.
Any other questions?
Any other questions from the board? Dave, it gets kind of old saying it, but you guys are just doing a great job in enforcement. You guys just do a wonderful job. All right, the next item on the agenda is item F, Public Affairs Committee Report. Public Affairs Chief Rick Lopes will give us the Public Affairs Committee Report. Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to start off by noting for the board, it's not in the update, but that we have begun one of our strategic plan items, which is our contractor outreach program. We have begun that. We'll briefly discuss it in the strategic plan when we get an update later, but I wanted to let the board know that right now we do have an online survey that we've made available to licensees. We've encouraged them to take that to give us some feedback, not only on their businesses, how they're doing, to try to find out a little bit more about them. We've also got some questions to ask them what kind of assistance that we might be able to provide them in giving them educational materials that then they could use when they actually go out and make their client presentations. We've gotten some very interesting feedback. About 700 people have taken it so far. And so we're looking between now and the next board meeting in December of having a Public Affairs Committee where we'll share that information as we kind of chart our way towards completing this program next spring.
Have any contractor board members filled it out yet?
That's unclear. We actually, they don't, unless they give us their information, we don't identify the actual folks who have actually taken it. Okay, so get into the report now. As you'll notice on page 1 is what our staffing update. You'll notice that we actually do have 2 vacancies right now, and that will kind of lead in later on as well when we talk about strategic plan. That does have a little bit of an effect on us being able to complete some of our projects in the timely manner that we had hoped to. But we do have, again, 2 openings right now in public affairs. On page 2, I want to note for the board that our website assistance project continues. We are working closely with our IT shop, and actually I think everybody now on our staff has now been trained, and even me. I'm pecking, hunting, and through and doing website coding now as part of my duties. We also note for the board that the web stream, there's a live web stream of today's meeting. It's why you see the camera here in the room with us. You also see there on page 2 the social media, our Facebook and Twitter information there. We've now gone over 1,000 people following us, liking us on Facebook, and very close to 1,000 now that are following us on Twitter. The email alert feature goes up onto page 3. You can see we've got more than 96,000 email addresses, and that number is growing. We also always encourage, especially our licensees, to sign up for our various email alerts. We do have the California Licensed Contractor newsletter, which we do have available here for the people at the meeting. We have sent them out to our 300,000 licensees. We are now doing these one time a year where they're mailing them. 3 times a year we're doing an online version. So we would encourage licensees to sign up to be able to receive notification that when those are available. On page 4, we're going through the media relations functions that we do, including the list of the press releases. At the end of the program update, you do see a sample of some of the media coverage we've gotten since our June meeting. On number 5, I wanted to note for the board the application instructional video is now complete and up on our YouTube page. This is a project that we worked closely with the licensing division on. One of the issues that licensing has had for years is a high number of applications that are not completed correctly, so they have to be sent back and get things to be fixed. I believe the number is upwards like 45%. And so we looked to try to create an application video that they could look at to kind of guide them through the application process, and hopefully we'll try to chart this in the months ahead, but hopefully people will be able to watch this and it will help them complete the application packet, the first time through, so that will help speed up their ability to get their license quicker. So it is up and available online now. You see the updated publications there on page 5. On page 6, you see the updated list of our Senior Scam Stopper seminars. I've also provided for the board members more of the list of looking ahead. We are getting close to the election, so for the 6 weeks before the election, we will not be conducting any Scam Stoppers with any legislator who's running for office in November. So you'll see a lot of them wanted to do Scam Stoppers this month. Jane Kreidler from my staff, as you can see from the dates there, is on the road a lot, but we're trying to accomplish as much as we can, and then we'll have a little bit of a down period during the month of October until right after the election. And we also did want to note for the board, too, that you see there at the end of page 7, our employee wellness program. We have put that, we've suspended it for right now because of the retired annuitant that we lost due to the government's latest furlough orders. So we just wanted the board to be aware that that we're no longer doing the employee wellness at this point. And with that, that completes the program updates.
A comment about the lien release forms being online where you can fill them out. That's a really, really great feature. Because first of all, the forms change, and a lot of contractors don't know that, especially small contractors. The verbiage that tells you how to use the forms is concise, and the fact that you can fill them out, because otherwise, if a contractor does not belong to a trade association where they can buy those, then they're forced to go on a website and buy those from someone. And that's just a really good service on something that should be free.
Okay, one of the things we're looking to as we create this licensee outreach program is we're going to be looking for opportunities to be able to get feedback from licensees. We're going to be able to utilize these surveys like we're doing right now. We can create those and try to get feedback and give them opportunities to let us know if there are things that we might be able to do to assist them.
Rick, are you going to be consolidating you may have said something about it, but are you going to be consolidating the information that you're getting from those surveys and some type of a chart and analysis of?
Yes, we'll put something together for the next Public Affairs Committee. We'd be happy to share that at the next board meeting if the board would like that as well. But yeah, we absolutely can put that together.
Wonderful, please do. Any other questions from board members? All right then, we'll proceed with the next item on the agenda, which is the Legislative Committee report. Legislative Committee Chair Lisa Miller-Strunk and Chief of Legislation Laura Zuniga will proceed with this report. Well done.
This will be quick. I'll just give you a brief update on the status of the legislation that is listed in the first part of the legislative update. The legislature adjourned at the end of last month, and so we're currently in the period for the governor to sign legislation. He has until the end of this month. Most of the bills that we were tracking have made it to the governor's desk, with the exception of AB 1655 by Assemblymember Dickinson and AB 1920 by Assemblymember Berryhill, and AB 2482 by Assemblymember Moth. So the rest are on the governor's desk, except one of our sponsored bills, AB 2554 by Assemblymember Berryhill, has already been signed by the governor. And one of the bills that the board had discussed earlier this year, SB 975 by Senator Wright, would have addressed who in state government can set requirements on licensees, whether it's just the purview of the licensing board or whether another state agency can impose additional requirements. The bill did make it to the governor, but it no longer affects the contractors board. It was narrowed to just address a few boards within DCA. That's it.
Any questions or comments from the board? Please state your name.
Mr. Chairman, Richard Markison. I'm here on behalf of Weekend PHCC. I also represent the American Society of Civil Engineers, and like your board, the Engineers Board on occasion has issues with quorum. Some California boards do not have the one-year lapse. I know some of your own board members have served their term, served their one-year lapse, gone off the board, then been reappointed, and at times there are quorum issues. One of the things that we're talking to the Architects Board and some of the other trade associations and professional societies is for the Engineers Board and possibly for your board to strike the provision in law that requires board members to go off, and that there would be a consistent treatment for board members, that they would serve until replaced by the governor. It would not extend their term. It simply says that they would continue to serve until replaced, obviating the inevitable situation when board members have served their entire permissible term, gone off, and then create quorum issues. We haven't spoken to the administration yet. I know that there have been some concerns that the legislature or the governor may object to that. We're not sure that that's going to be a significant issue. The governor still has the option at any time after a term is up to replace a board member, so there isn't really a question of a board member continuing to serve after their term is up if they're not doing a good job from the governor's perspective. But just an idea that I'd like to throw out. We will be talking to other groups over the next couple of months prior to the January introduction period, but I'd just like to throw that out for your consideration and for those.
Thank you for bringing that item to our attention. Chair recognizes Board Member Batkeley.
Action, about a year ago, maybe a little longer, to prevent that problem that the speaker was citing? When was the last time we had a quorum problem?
If I might, there's a myriad of issues involved. First of all, different boards have different setups. If your board requires the board members be confirmed by the Senate, there are different timelines. Typically, like for the Architects Board, if their term ends, their first term ends, they have a year grace period. So that Architect Board member can stay on for a whole year. If the year passes, the Architect Board member is off. Basically, the governor can decide within that year to reappoint that person, appoint someone else, or just let that person run the year. With the Contractors Board, all gubernatorial appointees require Senate confirmation. So after your first term is up, you have 60 days to be reappointed by the governor. If you're not reappointed within that 60 days, you're off the board. If you're appointed within that 60 days, you have a year to be confirmed by the Senate. And Taryn, is it a year from the, I think it's a year from the end of the term, not the year from, no, it's a year from when they're appointed? Okay. By the way, Taryn works for the Senate, and she's involved with those kinds of issues. What Richard's bringing before you really isn't the purview of an individual board. This is a policy decided by the governor and the Senate. And the quorum problems are generally more of a workload issue in the governor's office. I mean, we haven't had quorum problems compared to some boards that don't even have a quorum at all. Like there's, I think, one board maybe had 7 members. They only had 7 slots. They only had 3 members. They can't meet. They can't do anything. That's happened on occasion over the last few decades. So it's really the governor's responsibility to appoint members to those boards. And as far as changing dates or changing terms, I don't know, I just don't see that being an individual board issue. I'm only speaking from my knowledge of the Contractors Board and Architects Board. Maybe it is a different issue for others. We don't have that problem, and so I don't think it's an issue for us. Don, did I misstate anything, or do you think that was fairly correct?
You got the 60 days right, and you got the 1 year right. So, and again, I think, yeah. So you were correct on that. And again, I would tend to agree with Steve that we haven't faced that problem with this board. Some other boards do have faced quorum problems, but ultimately, it goes back to the responsibility of the appointing authority to exercise that authority to appoint.
Or exercising that authority not to appoint.
That too.
And on Senate appointments, when those terms end, there is a...
1 year. Generally, the rule is if it requires Senate confirmation, 60 days. If it doesn't, 1 year.
Any further questions or comments? All right, we'll move on to the Licensing Committee report. Licensing Committee Chair Ed Lang and Licensing Chief Karen Ollinger will give us the Licensing Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On August 28th, 2012, the committee met, and in a few minutes I'll be giving you the highlights of that meeting, and then Karen will continue with the review. Chief of Licensing Karen Ollinger provided the licensing program update. She presented the application workload statistic and commented that the number of applications received each month continued to decline. The licensing division experienced an 8% decrease in application received per month from fiscal year 2010, 2011, 2011, and 12. Ms. Ollinger also reported on the termination of all 13 student assistants working in the license division effective August 30th, 2012. This is results of a recent contract negotiation between the employees union and the state of California. The loss of these positions will have a significant negative impact on the license division, as these students have provided mission-critical support, which was helped to reduce the backlog in the division. Next in our committee report, we had Chief of Testing, Heidi Lancer-Hill, provided the testing division update. Heidi reported that effective September 4th, 2012, there will be a change in the current examination administration procedures, and that is lengthen the time allowed to complete each examination to 3.5 or 3.5 hours for each applicant. Then we had the committee presented was 4 issue papers, and that was number 1, translation of CSLB licensing exam. Number 2, retroactive fingerprinting of licenses. Number 3, mandatory continuing education. And number 4, renewal delinquency fees. These issued was accepted and now was being brought before the full board. This concludes the report of the Licensing Committee, and I will ask a motion to approve the committee report as of August 28th.
Second.
Chair.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved.
Okay, now we have the licensing program update. Chief of Licensing Karen Ollinger will provide that update. Karen.
Thank you. I'll make this brief since our meeting was only 2 weeks ago. Ed hit all the highlights. So if you turn to page 1 of the licensing program update, you'll find the chart showing the application workload. As just mentioned, we continue to see a decline for fiscal year 2011-12. We're down 8% on the overall average of our original applications, and we're seeing a total of 14% decrease for all applications as compared to last fiscal year. Page 2 breaks down the applications totals received by month, as well as the number of applications received broken down by the type of application. Page 3 and 4 highlight some of the information about the new LLC program. As you all recall, we rolled out the new LLC license, the limited liability company license program, in January of this year. To date, we've received, well, as of July 31st, we've received 421 LLC applications. We've issued 71 licenses. I think that just shows you we're still having an issue with getting those applications in the office correctly. We're still seeing that the most common reasons for having to reject is the applications do not match the Secretary of State's records. So we're working with our applicants, and we're hoping to reduce those number of rejects. We're seeing a little bit of a decline now, but it's kind of a learning process. Page 5, our fee increases. This is the last time you'll see this page. We've been putting it in here for years, so memorize those fees, and we're taking it out next time. Page 6 shows the disposition of applications by fiscal year. That just shows you by each fiscal year whether the applications have been issued, voided, or if they're still pending. And then the charts on page 16 to 18 show how long it's taking to process these applications. Those are our processing times that are based on from the time the application gets in the door and gets in our process, how long is it taking a technician to pull it. Page 7 shows that application route that they follow. On page 8, you'll find the fingerprinting criminal background statistics. We've printed a lot of people. Over 263,000 prints have been submitted. We've received criminal histories on over 45,000 since the rollout of this program in 2005. On pages 9, 10, and 11, the Licensing Information Center, you've got the workload and some information about staffing. We continue to struggle in the Licensing Information Center. The lack of agents available to take calls are really weighing on our call wait time, which are shown on the chart on page 11. We find that during break times and lunch times, even with staggered schedules, we're still having difficulty keeping up on the volume of calls that come in. So we did hire 2 part-time retired annuitants to help fill in those gaps, especially from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. That's when the permanent staff are either on breaks or on their lunch hour. This is starting to help with our wait times in the call center. I've already mentioned the quick tip and the processing, so I won't go through that again. Page 11 is the statistics for the call center. Again, we're struggling. July's average wait time was 9 minutes and 3 seconds. We have a goal of 4 minutes, but with the reduction in staff, we just aren't able to meet those time schedules. On page 12 begins the report on the judgment unit. As you know, the judgment unit processes all outstanding liabilities, bond payment of claims, judgments that come in. Outstanding liabilities come to us from FTB or EDD. Judgments usually come from consumers or other contractors. And then we have the bond payment of claims. For the fiscal year that just ended, we were instrumental in helping to collect over $60 million for the public with that unit. And unless there's any questions, that is the end of the program update.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Karen. With regard to the LLC apps, you said that they don't match the information of the Secretary of State's record. Is it a consistent issue? I mean, what area are we?
Well, most often the members that have to be listed on the app that they put on the application they submit to us don't match the records of the Secretary of State, or they haven't yet got their SOS number, license number for their LLC. Those are the 2 areas that we find the biggest problem. Whoever's listed on the LLC app with us as a member, a responsible managing member, there are a number of different titles. also have to show on Secretary of State records. And we go and check those records when we're processing, and oftentimes the people they list on the app either aren't on Secretary of State, or Secretary of State shows additional individuals that aren't listed on the app. As you know, some of the requirements are based on the number of personnel on the app. The liability insurance, it's $1 million up to, I think it's $1 million up to the first 5, and after that, it's another $100,000 for each member. So we have to make sure that our records match Secretary of State's.
Is there some, or could we put some directive, maybe it's too late, on that application?
And we do. We've put that on. We've put it out on the website. I think we even did an industry bulletin, didn't we, Rick? When we first rolled this out, when we started seeing what the typical reasons were for reject, to get the word out there. So
it's really a do-over for them, a complete do-over. They're not even pending.
Well, they're pending. We receive them, we look at them, review it, and then we send it, we do a reject and say, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z. We pend it. So when it comes back in, it gets worked right away. They don't have to start all the way over in the process. It's just like any other application. If it gets rejected, they have to make the correction, send it back in, and it goes to the same technician who was working on it, bounces into their inbox, and then they take care of it.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, question, Karen? So on a regular corporate license, do you match SOS records, or do you only do it on the LLC because you're trying to get thresholds? On
the regular corp license, they have to provide us president, secretary, and treasurer. We do match those, unless it's a foreign corporation in which they just provide president or CEO. So on LLCs, we match everybody because the threshold for the liability insurance is dependent upon the number of members on the LLC.
Match regardless?
Yes. Oh, yeah, we always check Secretary of State.
And do you have this kind of an issue pop up a lot on a corporate license?
Not much. Once in a while. I think...
So it tells me that these are people operating under a corporate license that are trying to pop on over
to an LLC.
Quickly.
Correct.
Sorry, before recognizes board member.
Just a question on the number of weeks before being pulled for application on original license.
Mm-hmm.
What seems to be the delay in being pulled, is that a direct result of loss of staff and
it's
because there doesn't seem to be a huge number of applications.
There are not, and we've lost some staff. We've now filled all those positions, but it's an issue of training the new staff in order to be able to process these applications. It's kind of a long training period. And then, of course, over summertime vacation. So they are staffing issues, but at this point in time, we are fully staffed, but we're training a number of new people in order to process these apps. Correct.
Thank you.
Karen, I have a question as well. Maybe I missed this, but why would a corporation want to switch over to an LLC when they have the required insurance requirements? What would be their incentive to switch to an LLC?
Lisa might know better than me, but...
No?
You and me,
Okay. Trying to figure it out. All right. The next item, are there any further questions by the board? The next item on the agenda is the testing division update. Back to Heidi.
Testing division, we have two vacant positions right now, one technical specialist and one economic position in San Diego. Working on filling. There is one change to what's in your packet. On the next paragraph says that DCA would not approve our request to create a staff services manager. Now we are moving forward. We have tentative approval from DCA to recreate a manager position to supervise our testing centers. So after DCA, that decision will have to go also to Cal HR. We're hopeful that will come about eventually. Wait time is 3 weeks. As applications are down, testing is down as well, so we don't have any trouble giving people a test date. And our Oakland Testing Center is going to be moving to Berkeley. It'll take 6 to 9 months for that process, but we're excited to move to a new facility that has free parking and a nicer facility, and be away from the protests that we have been dealt with this past year with the Occupy Oakland protesters being very near to our Oakland Test Center. So we're looking forward to that. The new building is occupied by Department of Toxic Substances Control and Cal EPA, so those people understand contractors, so we're happy to be in the same building with them. We're also using some of our test centers for other projects. We've been using test centers for the ER1 exam for a year or so. We're going to continue to do that. We have been asked by DCA to use our Southern California test centers to do training for the Breeze software. And so when that eventually gets up and running, they'll be using our test centers for training. And see, Ed told you about change to our administration procedures. We're lengthening the time that applicants have to take the examination. We're going from 2.5 to 3.5 for all applicants. There have been some complaints over the years that they didn't have enough time, and we, given that the downturn now with less exams being given, we used to have 3 exam sessions in a day, and that was why we had the 2.5 hours, but we haven't had 3 sessions for a long time, so we have 2 sessions now, so we don't have an issue with giving them 3.5 hours, and that's going to be beneficial for applicants and for our staff to not have to deal with applicants who are running out of time. As far as exam development goes, we're doing well. Even with a down of 1 testing specialist, we're on track with all of our occupational analyses to keep them on a 5-year schedule. We're also helping out the Department of Consumer Affairs with their examination development office, who have experienced some unexpected staffing shortages. We're helping them out with some projects on a short-term basis until they get up fully staffed again. And I think that's it. Anyone has any questions?
Okay. Next, we're going to item number H4. Review and approval of recommendation regarding. And if that's in your packet, there was 3 issues on discussion or approval of license committee recommendation. Translation of CSLB licensing exams, retroactive fingerprinting of licensed contractor, and continuing education. As you remember, during the last few Senate confirmation hearing, board members were asked to take up on some of their policy questions. They included whether the board should translate its licensing exam into foreign languages, and whether the board should implement retroactively fingerprinting. The board was frequently being asked its position on mandatory continuing education. At the board's last strategic planning meeting, these issues were discussed at length, and based on those discussions, staff was prepared to issue papers, and that's in your packet, with recommendation for the committee's consideration and action. The committee meeting that we had August 28th took action on that and recommended to go to the full board. I will now ask Heidi and Karen to provide background on these matters.
In your packet, we prepared a report summarizing the data for 2008, 2011 that relates to the translation of examinations. The CSLB translated policy allows applicants to bring in their own translator, provided that the person is approved by the testing division. The translator must complete an application that is reviewed to ensure that the person doesn't work in an industry that would provide knowledge related to the CSLB's examinations, for example, legal, accounting, architecture, engineering, etc. In order to take the examination, the translator and the applicant sit at separate computers and they communicate over a phone line using a microphone and earphones. They can't see each other. The translator sees the examination questions and then translates them to the applicant. The applicant selects his or her answer, then the translator cannot see which answer the applicant selected, and all translations are tape recorded. Test monitors oversee this process by tapping into the phone line and listening to the transaction. Test monitors are trained to identify patterns that indicate possible misconduct. And if misconduct is suspected, a certified interpreter is hired after the fact, and they review the translation and give us a report on whether they think cheating was occurring. But the first point I want to make is that the number of examinations administered with translators is a very small percentage of the overall examinations administered. It is basically less than 2%. It's 1.75% of all of our examinations. And the next point to make is that the number of languages multiplied by the number of examinations. Although there were 5 major languages translated for the law examination, there are different patterns for each of the trade examinations. Overall, we have applicants use translators for 35 different languages. So you can see that due to the fact we have 45 examinations and 35 languages, it makes it impossible for us to have translated examinations available for all applicants. So a lot of times people think, oh, it's simple, just translate all your exams into Spanish and be done with it. And it's not that simple here. We also use multiple versions of each examination and translating an entire bank of CSLB questions. We have some 700 items in our item banks, some 1,000 items in our item banks, and that would be cost and time prohibitive to translate all those items. Aside from translating the questions ourselves, another option that we looked at was why don't we provide or require certified translators? And this option is very expensive and gives us less control over the background of the translator. We wouldn't be able to screen them to make sure they weren't knowledgeable about things that are related to construction. We wouldn't be able to control how often they translate. Right now we can control, we don't let people translate more than once per year. We would also have to answer protests from applicants that the translator did not translate properly. We know other boards have that issue when they translate the exam. Applicants complain that it wasn't translated properly, it wasn't translated in their dialect. So we have those issues. So in summary, although it isn't perfect, the current process was designed to meet the needs of English as a second language applicants, be cost effective, and to treat all applicants fairly and maintain examination security. The main weakness of the current method is that the quality of the translation varies depending on who they bring for a translator. Most of our applicants do not bring certified translators because of the cost. Mostly they bring family or friends, and depending on that person's skill and with English and being able to understand the terms on the examination, so that the quality can vary.
Mr. Chair, due to the length of these issues, I recommend that we take each issue separately, unless the board suggests otherwise. Okay.
Could I ask a question?
Sure. Go ahead.
Question. On that 1.75 or whatever it was % of those who are taking an exam with a translator, do we have any information to show what percentage of those people pass it compared to the number non-translated? Is it?
It's not in this report, but it is very low. The number who pass. I don't know the exact number, but it is lower than the people who do not use a translator.
Very low, significantly low. And then my other question is, have you explored those costs?
The costs
of
using a certified
pardon me?
Of which?
No, of translating the exams into these different languages. Have the costs been explored? I mean, you say it's prohibitive. I think we have, we just have to know if out to lunch prohibitive or?
Well, it's not just, it is prohibitive because it's not just a matter of hiring someone to translate the examinations technically from testing standards. If you translate an exam, you then have to have people read it and confirm that it is translated correctly, a different group of people. So you basically have to do your whole exam development process a second time and confirm that the questions conform to the occupational analysis as they were designed to do, as you did originally. So it's called retranslating. It's a huge process. So that's one issue. And the practical issue is if we got it all translated, it would then have to be a static thing, whereas we have ongoing workshops to review and revise our items. And so if we did that, we would have to retranslate those items. So times 45 examinations, I can tell you it would be very expensive and require additional staff.
I know you've given us information in the past as to how many times somebody can retake the test, whichever test they're taking. So there is that option for people that fail, no matter whether they speak English or Chinese, and that's within a certain period of time.
They can take it as many times as they want in an 18-month period. Mm-hmm. They have to wait 3 weeks between applications, between test administration.
Thanks, Heidi.
Any other questions? Then, Mr. Chair, I move that we accept CSOB recommendation option 2, and that's on page 9.
So moved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? So moved.
Let's now take issue number 2, retroactive fingerprinting for licensed contractors.
Thank you. Okay, the issue paper is in your packet, and hopefully everyone's had a chance to read it. I won't go over all of the points, but just briefly, under Business and Professions Code 144, all CSLB applicants must submit to fingerprinting and undergo a criminal background check prior to licensure. As you're aware, we implemented this requirement in 2005. To date, we've fingerprinted approximately 40% of our licensed population. When we implemented this program, we required fingerprinting of all new applicants, as well as any existing licensee seeking to modify his or her license, such as adding a classification or changing the entity type. We did not go back and require fingerprinting from existing licensees. Prior unsuccessful legislation would have required the CSLB to retroactively fingerprint all existing licensees. This issue has also been raised through legislative committee members and during the board's sunset review hearings. For a number of reasons, the staff has recommended that the CSLB take a position in opposition to the retroactive fingerprinting of existing licensees. The reasons for this position are outlined on pages 2 and 3 of the paper before you, but just briefly, I'll go over some of those reasons. Such a requirement to retroactively fingerprint would significantly impact the CSLB's licensees. Since fingerprinting would likely occur at the time of renewal, this could result in significant delays for licensees. Licensees who fail to renew in a timely manner for any reason are not able to contract and may be subject to non-payment for their services. Retroactive fingerprinting does not guarantee public protection. Often the persons entering the home are not the actual licensees and would not be subject to fingerprinting. And since we began the fingerprinting in 2005, there really is a level of confidence that those who have not been printed at least have 7 years of competent work activity, or they probably would have been subject to some disciplinary or criminal action. We often are made aware of any criminal activity out in the industry by other means other than fingerprinting. Finally, the CSLB does not have the resources to implement retroactive fingerprinting. In fact, we're currently having difficulty meeting our current mandates given the recent staffing cuts. If we were mandated to implement such a program, we estimate we would need at a minimum 7.5 additional analysts over the next 3 renewal cycles, next 6 years, at a cost of nearly $4 million. So for these reasons, we recommend we take a position against the retroactive fingerprinting.
Any questions?
In addition, it's important to point out that the $4 million includes all these staff and benefits, because a lot of that was set aside for out-of-state license checks.
Yes, we have out-of-state license checks. We would have programming.
Any other comments? Okay, Mr. Chair, I'd like to entertain a motion that CSLB does not approve the retroactive fingerprinting requirement that should be expanded due to lack of resources.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye? Aye. All opposed? So approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The last issue, continuing education, and that's Karen.
All right, me again. Okay, again, the issue paper is in your packet. I'll just hit a couple of the highlights on mandatory continuing education. Many professions, especially in the healthcare fields, require mandatory continuing education or continuing competency of its licensees. Typically, this requires a set number of educational hours to be completed as a condition of license renewal. The need for both continuing education and continuing competency is expressed as both a public protection and professional development. However, there appears to be no empirical evidence that demonstrates a clear conjunction between the continuing education mandate and improved practitioner performance. So the board, before considering a mandatory continuing education requirement, should ask, 1, is there a problem? Is mandatory continuing education the best way to address this problem? Is there a connection between the problem and the solution? Does the board have the necessary staff and budget to make mandatory continuing education effective? Is there a measurement tool to assess the value of mandatory continuing education? And is the solution worth the cost to licensees? Continuing education imposes a cost on both licensees and the licensing board. Depending on how the requirement is structured, there could be a significant workload impact. We have over 300,000 licensees. If we required all of them to complete mandatory continuing education as part of their license renewal, there would probably also be a requirement that the board audit a certain percentage in order to verify compliance. Given the size of our licensee population, this would require significant additional resources. On the licensee's part, the mandatory continuing education would likely impose a significant financial burden, as they would need to pay to attend courses and would need to take time away from work to attend the courses. I think given in our current economy, this is not something that licensees would embrace. Finally, without an identified problem within the construction industry that mandatory continuing education would address, and for the reasons outlined in the paper in your packet, staff is recommending that the board adopt a position opposing mandatory continuing education for licensed contractors at this time.
Any questions on the recommendation? Seeing or hearing none, Mr. Chair, we move that the board take the position that we do not take up continuing education at this time.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So
Okay, agenda item H5, and discussion and possible recommended change of policy regarding renewal delinquency fees. Karen?
Okay. Well, here's a switch. Here's something we want you to embrace and do. Delinquent renewal fees. Currently, if an individual submits their renewal, say they expire July 31st and they submit it July 30th and they pay their fee, but they forgot to sign their form, we reject it, and when they return it, they have to pay a delinquency fee now because they're just is no time to get it back in time to avoid that delinquency fee. What we are proposing is that we give licensees a little window of opportunity to waive that delinquency fee, provided they got their renewal in on time, they paid the appropriate fee on time, but if it has to be rejected for what is typically a minor oversight, we are proposing that we give them 90 days to waive that fee, not to waive the renewal time. They will still expire as of the date they expire, and until they get their acceptable renewal in, they will show delinquent. So, for example, in my scenario, I submitted it July 30th, I expired the 31st. It got rejected, I got it back 2 weeks later on August 14th. There will be a lapse in my license. I just would not be subject to that additional $160 or $180. I have to look at my fee chart. That additional fee, because they submitted it on time originally. This is very much like DMV, for example, and I'm not faulting these licensees. I'm one who waits till the last moment to submit my registration, and a couple of times I didn't have my smog done yet. I got a notice of incomplete renewal, didn't renew me, but I didn't have to pay the fee. I talked to a friend of mine at the optometry board where I used to work. They have the same process. As long as you got your renewal in on time with the appropriate fee, you don't get charged that delinquency fee if it has to be returned to you for a minor error. So what we're proposing is a 90-day kind of grace period before we charge the delinquency fee. This would require a change to our regulations. We have a regulation 853 that we would need to amend in order to state that a licensee who got the renewal in on time would have a 90-day period in order to complete or fix an incomplete renewal. So we're asking that the board adopt this and allow us to seek a change to that regulation.
Thank you, Karen. Are there any questions on this issue?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, my question would be, so the 31st comes and goes, I haven't submitted anything. I haven't responded to the letter that I was sent. Is there any grace period now?
No.
No, he's immediately...
If your expiration date comes and goes, now you are responsible for the delinquency fee. This is only for people who got it in on time, but some oversight.
Delinquency fee aside, there's no 90-day grace period as a renewal to get that paperwork in?
No.
Thank you.
What's the oversight?
Usually they forget to sign their name on the form, on the renewal form. That's the most common reject. They just forgot to sign it.
We got the money though.
Hey, if they forget to write their name on the check, we still deposit it. We're the state.
Any other questions on that issue? Then, Mr. Chair, I move that the board should amend CCR Section 853 to provide that contractors who file their renewal application and pay the required renewal fee timely should not later be subject to delinquency fee. If the renewal application is subsequently rejected and the required corrections are received by CSLB within 90 days of the original expiration date. However, during the time period in which an acceptable renewal application has not been received and processed by CSLB, the license shall not be renewed and the status shall show as expired. And that's the motion. That's the motion. Yes. I want to make sure that's there.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? So approved.
Mr. Chair, that ends the committee's report.
The next item on the agenda is the special committee report. Please, Deputy Registrar of Senior Circumstance will provide the next three items.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Paul. First, what I want to bring you up to date on are some staffing and hiring changes we've had over the past few months. Larry Parrott, who's our Chief of Admin, oversees business services and human resources. And we had two managers that were vacant. Both of them worked for him, and he really worked very hard during the recruitment process, and I want to commend him for all his efforts. Just want to have Nicole Lee, if you could stand up. Nicole is our manager over human resources. She comes from the Department of Motor Vehicles, and she's been a great asset so far for the few months she's been here. And then Mike Maliza is our manager over business services. Mike worked at the Department of Consumer Affairs overseeing their contracts unit, so he has also brought a wealth of experience to our office. And as a side note, Mike and I go way back. He used to work as a student assistant when I was at the Engineers Board, what, 1 or 2 years ago? Actually, like several years, right? So anyway, the next person is Debbie Thompson. She's our retired annuitant. She's been helping out with the budget since Jonathan has been gone. We're hoping, we've had a few little glitches in the hiring process, and we're hoping that we do have a person that should be starting within the next month or so. So I'd like to thank Debbie. And then Laura will be leaving us shortly. She's going to be getting a new addition to her family, a little boy, in what, 2 weeks? So in her absence, we're going to try and get Mike Brown back as a retired annuitant so that she's not stressed out during that time. And we also have a special project going. Karen Austin, who works in the licensing unit, used to work at Consumer Affairs in the auditing division. And the registrar and the director, we've had a lot of problems with our hiring process. It's been very slow and lengthy, and as a consequence of that, we've lost several critical hires. So Karen is working on a project where she's reviewing the processes at the Department of Consumer Affairs, as well as our end, to see if we can't streamline things and get that hiring process so that we can move a lot quicker in the near future. So that's it for some hires. Business services update, you have the facilities update and contracts update on page 2. I'm going to highlight the fleet management, but I'll speak more about that on the loss of resources. As far as the information technology division update, Amy Cox-O'Farrell is here. She's going to be talking about the Breeze update later on. Workers' compensation insurance, that's on target to be implemented January 2013. IT staff retirements, we have 2 key staff programming unit staff that will be retiring at the end of November. So they've been cross-training, and hopefully we can get people hired in to replace them and maybe get 1 or 2 of them back as a retired annuitant to help us out. Any questions? One of Steve's and my favorite things that's happened over the past 2 years has been the loss of resources. And on page 1, you'll see the overview. We've lost cell phones, we've lost vehicles, our work hours have been reduced, and most recently our staff has had to do another day of furloughs. So you'll see for our permanent staff, if you look in 2001 to 2002, we had 471 permanent positions. After the last loss of positions, we're down to 399, but then you add in the furloughs, and it gets further reduced to 379 PYs. So we're asking our staff to do, as much work as they have been doing, but with less people to assist, less equipment, and I think they're doing a great job. We're just all trying to pitch in there. Looking at the last thing that we encountered was, as a part of the agreement for the furloughs, the unions had said that we'd like you to get rid of all your non-mission critical retired annuitants and your student assistants. And it was really kind of a fight to the finish for our retired annuitants. We started off with the first round where we had 6 approved, and then we had to go through an appeal process. Steve and David Folk met with the agency secretary, and as a result of that, we've got most of them approved. If you look on the list, most of our retired annuitants, they're either approved until we get a permanent intermittent position filled behind them, or until at the end of June 2013. These retired annuitants, they provide critical functions here at CSLB. It would just be
Fortunately, we were able to keep most of them, but just the historical knowledge that they bring to CSLB, their training. Like, for instance, in our HR section, we have Renee Lucchini, who used to work for us, and she has just been instrumental in helping our staff while we didn't have a manager, and now training individuals. And we're very fortunate we were able to keep them, but it was quite a struggle to get to that point. As far as our student assistants, that's been a huge loss, especially in licensing. They really helped out in the call center, processing applications, and license maintenance. We had over 13 student assistants in those areas. And the nice thing about the student assistant program, especially from our managers and executive perspective, is this is where we get the people that come into state service. We see how effective they are, they see how the state system works, and we were able to bring a lot of those good workers into the state system. But now they're gone, they don't really have jobs. We're going to try and bring them in through a seasonal program, and hopefully they'll qualify and we can bring some of them back. But in the meantime, we may see higher call wait times, application processing times may be a little bit more lengthy, but we just deal with it as we can. And let's see, the personal services contracts. This is mainly impacting us in the IT section, and the executive order that was issued in February 15, 2011, it stated that state agencies and departments are prohibited from initiating or increasing personal services contracts to compensate for the effects of the hiring restrictions. We'd always been able to get IT staff in to help, like in major projects, like for instance Breeze, or if we needed specific programming skills, we were able to get those. But now it appears that the answer is no, so we don't know. It will impact us eventually, but at this point in time, we're just kind of hoping that we have the resources within CSLB to take care of that. But it will impact us eventually, and hopefully it will not impact Breeze. And then lastly, on the loss of resources, we've been going around with our cars. When we started off in 2009, CSLB had 105 vehicles. Today we have 72, and we're going to be losing 12 more, which brings down to 60 vehicles. So what we did is part of the executive order said that if you, basically to all the departments and agencies, that if you reduce your vehicles to a certain threshold, then they will consider the fact that you can purchase new vehicles. So what we did is we had to work backwards to that. We were the first board to get all of our information in on time. Unfortunately, because we worked for a big agency, they had to wait for other boards and other departments to get their information in line to go within that exemption. So they said, yes, go ahead and submit your paperwork. So the critical time frame for us was that we had to have everything in to the vendor that supplies our cars by August 31st. So we started this process back in March or April. Finally got the completed paperwork to Consumer Affairs in May. There was a lengthy review process, and on August 29th, we received information from the DGS, Department of General Services Fleet Services, saying that it would probably be denied. They had some concerns with the justifications we'd sent in for the 10 cars we wanted to replace. The I think it's the SAM manual, says that if your cars exceed 120,000 miles, then you can replace them. You should replace them. Well, that changed all of a sudden. That went to 130,000 miles. So we argued that, we believe the safety of our, especially our investigators out in the field, is just, it's very important to us. And so we did not want them in these cars that have high mileage or poor service records. Well, they came back and said, well, unless you can actually prove that an inspector said that these cars are just going to break down and fall apart on the road, then we're not going to approve your request. So at this point, we have, we did get one car we believe we'll be able to replace, but what they said is we've got to take a car from State Lands Commission. It's a 2000 Ford Taurus, and it has 60,000 miles, so we will be getting that. And then we're hoping once the new contract comes in 2 months that we'll be able to replace the remainder of the cars. Of course, the 130,000 miles may change and go up to something else. Yeah. So, like I said, our staff has just been doing a great job. They've been very understanding with all of this, but it's just been difficult. So, I think that's all I have. And I think before we go on to the budget, Steve, did you want to talk about strategic plan now or after budget update?
I did a handout for you that has our current objectives. And what I'd like to do is run through those real quick. Then I'd like to introduce you to our strategic planning facilitators who are here from the Department of Consumer Affairs and update you on a couple other issues. I'll just run through these very quickly. Objective 1 is working with the industry. It looks like this, by the way, if you haven't found yours yet. Work with industry, stakeholders. That is on track. We're working with DLSC and DOSH right now. We don't think we need to have any MOUs or have legislation. So David's met with the AG's office and our ES2s and Division of Industrial Relations. So that's moving along. Maybe fourth quarter, but it is moving along. Number 2, the workers' comp. That was supposed to go into effect last January. We moved the objective to third quarter 2012 because we couldn't hire staff to do the programming. Then we couldn't do a personal services contract to have someone program. Then we lost our student assistants. So we're hopeful. We think we're shooting for January 1st. But getting back to some of the things we discussed earlier, like retroactive fingerprinting, continuing education, this is an example of something we didn't have staff to do that's already a law. And that's just, having new mandates just wouldn't work. The flagship contractor, consumer publications number 3, we're moving that to the first quarter of 2013, but Rick's group is working ahead on that. Number 4 is done. Number 5, the education letter. Remember, we talked about that as strategic planning. We have a draft. We're working with Dawn, and we hope to have that ready to go the end of the year. So that's on track for a target date. Working with EDD, on number 6, we're done. We did our part, CSLB. Because of some staffing changes at EDD, we're trying to figure out whether we should go ahead on our own or wait for EDD. But we've done our part. Dave will be trying to figure that out in the weeks and months ahead, whether to go ahead with us on our own. Number 7, the solar alternative issue. We don't see it as an issue. We thought it was going to be, but it really hasn't been. All of our enforcement programs and licensing programs that are in place seem to be addressing it. So we're recommending that this be dropped unless something else comes to us from industry or for the consumers. Number 8 is done. Heidi talked about that. Number 9 is on track. Be done in fourth quarter. 10, the outreach program. Rick's group is surveying contractors. I think we have over 700 responses. That's on track for fourth quarter. The asbestos issue, that could be a little tough, but we're on track. We hope to have regulatory language for the board at our December board meeting regarding that issue. Number 12, collecting licensee emails. Heidi's working on that. That's on track. 13, the presentation kit. Rick's group is on track for the target date. Same with 14. 15, basically we're trying to standardize all of our publications, internal documents throughout the state. That's what that means, and we're on track for that target date. Breeze, who knows? Amy will talk about that. Same with 17, because that's part of Breeze. The subsequent arrest unit we have on our objectives every single year. We'll have it on our plan next year because it got denied at agency this year, so simply change 2014 to 2015, and you'll see it again next year. Number 19. This was an overarching issue the board discussed. We really want to look at our law and regs and see, can we simplify the ability of contractors to work in this state? The economy's struggling, the industry's struggling. Let's take another look at every law, every reg, and see if we really need it and it's really worth the cost. So we'll be looking at that next year. And the sunset review, every time we have a sunset review date, that's set in statute. A couple of things we're working on now that aren't on it, that both the federal government under the Obama administration and Governor Brown and the legislature are really pushing taking care of the veterans who are coming home. And the department's been working with groups from the Department of Military Affairs and the Air National Guard and Department of Veterans Affairs to look at providing opportunities for returning veterans to get licenses. Now, the effort is much broader than just licenses, but for the department, you know, what can we do to, say, have a carpenter in the, let's just say Navy, there's probably not a whole lot of them in the Navy, but Army, and
CVs, they're called CVs.
yeah, they actually do. All right, stand corrected. Pipe fitters, I think. But
now you're getting to real technical.
All right. But, you know, we do accept military experience, so we thought this is not a problem for the Contractors Board. But then we met and we realized, you know, we could probably simplify things. So they are providing us what's called MOSs. It's the description of the classification you have in the armed forces. And Rick Vellucci is working up in classifications. We're going to set up a system where our license application people can look at it and know immediately if they have their, it's now DD 214, but they won't even need to have the certification. They will know based on military records that they have however many years they worked in that MOS on their discharge papers. Again, the goal, make it simpler for us as a board to acknowledge that legitimate experience from veterans. But we're taking it a step further. When we met with them, we started exploring things like setting up our own web pages. So if veterans come to our site, we'll have information for those veterans. And we're going to provide Department of Veterans Affairs with information that they can have so that when they're being discharged, these veterans will know that, hey, if you have this, you can apply for a license in California, or you can, you know. So it's not just making sure that our applicants meet our criteria, but providing information both ways to expand their opportunities and simplify it. So we're really excited about that, and it's going very well. That's the main thing that deals with. It's something we're working on that wasn't on the objectives. A couple of Mike Brown. We do have paperwork in to bring him back as retired annuitant. In addition to dealing with the legislative proposals, I'm asking him to deal with the substantial compliance issue. Where so if anyone in the state can deal with it, Mike can do it. So this might be our last best chance. That came up with strategic planning, so he's going to give that a shot. And we'll have our holiday lunches in December. Paul and I will be sending out an email inviting you to those. We'll let you know the details about dates and locations, seeing if you can all help. You look forward to that. And I think that's all I needed to cover.
Amy Cox?
Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I so apologize. Could Tom and Shelley come forward? One of the things we asked the board in an email I sent to you yesterday, Joan, myself, Cindy met with Shelley and Tom from the department. They're from a group called Solid. I'm sorry, Cindy. They do strategic planning, among other things, for the Department of Consumer Affairs. They've done it for other boards. Yeah, we had a very productive meeting, and Cindy and I and Joan's take was kind of, you like the process the way it was last year. So we wanted to know, first of all, is that a correct assessment? Do you want any major changes from how we did it last year? And Joan, if you have any comments?
Well, I think you sent out a memo last night or this morning, I can't remember, and, you know, if everyone could research their memory bank into the process that we went through, it just seemed very productive to me, and I think these guys would really benefit, although they're very, very experienced and have different styles and backgrounds, and I think it's really going to be you know, the same thing that we've done will evolve onto a different level. So.
Well, I wanted to start by saying I wanted to thank you for the opportunity of having us, inviting us in to assist you with the development of your 13-14 strategic plan. We talked about it in detail yesterday after we met with you. We're very excited about some of the plans we have in place. My goal for this project is to create as seamless a process as possible to transition from the facilitator that you've used the past few years transitioning to some of the methods and tools that we use for strategic planning. So to that end, I really would like to hear from you your experiences about, you know, either now, or you can send an email or whatever vehicle you find best for you, just to get your feedback on what worked for you, what didn't work, what did you like, what did you not like, what would you have liked to have seen the other facilitator do that maybe they didn't do, and just kind of use that to kind of guide our process in decision making. I think we really started yesterday sketching out a really good plan that I think is going to be very, very good, and it's really going to target the unique needs of your board. So I'm very excited that we were able to talk with you and kind of sketch out how that's going to look. So any kind of feedback you can provide us would just enhance the process. And I do want to, you know, also introduce my co-facilitator, Tom Roy, who works in my office as well. So the two of us will be facilitating the meetings and interviews and discussions and planning session with you.
Are you going to be contacting us all by phone to chit-chat, or?
Yeah, one of the things that we did discuss is doing some either face-to-face interviews or phone interviews, whatever you're comfortable with. We'll be going out to you to do that in the next few months. I know we've got some time until the April planning session, so we'll work backwards from that and schedule things. And we'll make sure we give you plenty of notice and also some information ahead of time about what we want to discuss and kind of the environmental scan issues that we want to look at from you, about where you think the industry is at, what are some of the strengths and weaknesses of our organization, as well as some of the opportunities and threats out there that are facing us in the upcoming years.
Well, thank you.
We let them know that we are a bunch of curmudgeons. Have fun and
the secret's out?
Yeah, especially Bob Lamb. That's Bob. I was telling you about him.
Watch out for me. Yeah. Oh, no. It's all true.
I think we have some great techniques and tools, and just based on the discussion that we have, I think that it's going to be a great process, and I think it will be rewarding on both sides. And I think we'll come up with some good information that will really be able to set your strategic directions for the upcoming years. So I'm excited about it.
One thing, since we have some industry representatives out there, one of the things we did want to do differently is we wanted to get an assessment from industry of what you see as our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, or SWOT. So maybe a survey monkey, you said, or what's your plans for that?
Yeah, one of the things that we wanted to do, and we've done with success with other boards, is that we now have been able to create a survey. Survey Monkey is an online survey service where we can send out an email that kind of gives you some instructions on what we're looking for. You click the link and it takes you to Survey Monkey, which will then guide you through a series of questions where we ask you your input about what you find are some of the challenges that the board may be facing. What are some of the strengths and weaknesses of the organization that you would like to see addressed in the upcoming years? And just to get that perspective. And I think that will be very valuable when the board members go into their planning session to kind of see where they're going in the future, and to get that perspective from you, I think will be critically important. So I think that's great that you wanted to do that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, we as we exited yesterday, And I did point out that you two have very different styles. Would you mind giving us, each of you, a bio, just real short?
Absolutely. Just as an introduction again, my name is Shelley Menzel. I'm the manager of the Solid Unit over the Department of Consumer Affairs. We are the Strategic Planning and Training Unit over for the department, and we provide strategic planning services to all of the boards, as well as training and development opportunities for board staff. My experience with strategic planning goes back 15 years. I've been in training and development and strategic planning for the past 15 years with the state of California. I've been involved in developing strategic plans for the Legislative Council Bureau, as well as for the Bureau of Gambling Control with the Department of Justice, as well as for the California Student Aid Commission as well, before coming to the Department of Consumer Affairs. While at the Department of Consumer Affairs, I've worked to develop strategic plans for many boards, including Barbering and Cosmo, the Board of Barbering and Cosmo, as well as the accountancy. Tom, did you want to do a little introduction of yourself as well?
First of all, I wanted to tell you guys, I heard a lot of doom and gloom stories, and we are a totally free service provided by DCA. For 5 years, I was private industry as a fleet manager down at Folsom Lake Ford, and I was recruited to come over to the state. And for the last 2 years, I've assisted in about half of the 38 boards and bureaus strategic plans, so we're really excited about this opportunity. Yeah, that's pretty much my only experience as far as strategic planning goes, but it's great. I think I'm looking forward to the opportunity.
Thank you.
As far as the boards we've done Veterinary Medical Board, Speech Language and Pathology Board, Bureau of Private Secretary Education, Cemetery Funeral Bureau, Bureau of Security Investigative Services, Board of Optometry, Dental Board. Yeah, I can email you guys a list of all the ones we've done. It's kind of hard to think about it all the time.
I think we're good. I think we're okay on that. Right.
And one of the things that you can do is, of course, all of these are public-facing documents, so the strategic plans that we've developed for these various boards are available on their websites if you wanted to get a sample of the type of work that we put together. So we're looking forward to this. Thank you.
You have a challenge ahead of you.
Right.
Right. Here.
Here.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, we have a couple of cleanup items to attend to. Did I interrupt somebody? No, we're okay. Okay. Budget update and update on Breeze.
On page 1, you'll see the end of year, fiscal year 2011-2012 budget and expenditures. No surprises since we weren't able to buy very much equipment, and we had some staffing reductions we couldn't hire. We are reverting close to about 1 month, which is $4.6 million, so that will go into our fund eventually. As far as revenue for 2011 and 12, you'll see that it's up 13.4%, and that's mainly due in part to our fee increase. On page 2, our budget for this fiscal year, this was in budget bill, 2012 budget bill. Nothing has really changed from last year. It's a little bit more, $59.5 million. On page 3, our fund condition, which projects out to 2014 and 15, and you'll see that if things don't change, or if we keep reverting money like we have been, it may be extra months out there, but we may have to go in for a fee increase if things keep going the way they are. And lastly, on page 4, you have the construction management education account. And there again, 2014 and 15, you'll see that we have approximately a 4-month reserve. So, any questions?
Excuse me, Cindy, I have a question. The increase from 11 to 12, I'm looking at expenditures on page 3, and it says disbursements, program expenditures, state operations, 53 to 59 million. That's a pretty significant increase from 11 to 12 to 12, 13. What would that?
I'll have to ask Debbie.
So if we assume status quo, our actual expenditures would be somewhere in that 53 or 54 million range relative to the budget. Any other questions or comments from the board? Amy, if you could lead us with an update on Breeze.
Okay. Are there any questions? First, before I begin, update on Breeze, I'd like to thank the staff, the CSLB staff, that have been helping with Breeze. They've been doing a tremendous job. A lot of the IT staff are working on the business requirements and testing, and also helping some of the other boards and bureaus understand how they need to do it, because these are IT people doing business requirements. So it's been very instrumental in helping the other boards and bureaus. And a special thank you to Jillian Seeley. Yes, she's doing a fantastic job. She's helping with the enforcement requirements and helping some of the testing there. So thank you guys for that. Okay. As far as Breeze, due to staffing resource issues, and it's two sides, both the vendor and the state staff, we've had a lot of folks leave, retirements. We've had positions terminated, reasonable RAs cut, and our students, we've lost all of those. And so what we've had to do is just relook at the project plans, and we have Accenture going back, looking at their project plan. Their plan is due second week in October. And then what we do is we take their plan, and that's where the November date came in, because they think that with their resources, they can get the project release one started sometime in November. So the state, we have to then map our resources to that plan, and then we have to agree on the date. Okay. At this point, I think our last update at the exec committee meeting was maybe December, January. So that's what we're looking at right now. And part of the other problem is the data conversion. I think we really underestimated what that's going to take, and that's mapping or converting millions and millions of records into this new system. And there's a lot of fallout. The initial runs, we run sample data to see how many records fall out that basically just can't convert, you can't, date of births are incorrect, some calculations are incorrect. So that's kind of major fallout on that. So if you think 10 to 11 weeks just to convert release one, and those are all the allied health boards and bureaus. Okay. Now there's three releases: R1, R2, and R3. If R1 gets pushed to December, January, it doesn't necessarily mean R2 and R3 will get pushed 3 months out. Okay. So what they were planning on is running these different phases in parallel. So that's what they're looking at right now. I suspect release 3, which CSLB is in, will probably be November, December. Okay, but we will know for sure second week in October. We'll have a better idea. Steve?
What was the original R1 date?
October.
Oh, what? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's a 3-month push. No, it's not bad at all. Okay.
And are you going to be able to try and get other resources, either through permanent intermittent or kind of more RAs, or you have vacant permanent PYs you're trying to fill?
We have vacant permanent PYs we're trying to fill, but we're also, at the same time, the governor's reorg plan. We're trying to figure out how we incorporate, because there's IT staffing that are coming over. I don't know how many folks know about that. There's pest, structural pest, chiropractor, Department of Real Estate, and Department of Real Estate appraisers. They are merging with the department, as is their IT departments. So we've got to make sure that I don't go in an SRA mode and moving those in. So, you know, the timing sucks, but I think we're going to be able to do it. And that's why the state wants the 2 weeks after Accenture gives us their project plan, then to map our resourcing requirements to that. Then we will be presenting to the Executive Steering Committee what we need to do to make that happen. Okay.
Chance you can get a personal services contract for any of your data needs?
We will try. I think we will for some of the complex ones, the database administration. We've already got some going on that. And so far it's been very positive with the Department of Labor Relations in getting those through. And what we do is we show the staff that will be performing those functions. Once we go live, we are getting them trained. We're doing some recruitment. So as long as we are showing that we have permanent staff, they're going to be doing these functions, but it's a matter of getting them trained. They are allowing our contracts to go through. So basically there's a beginning and an end to that personal service, and we are showing that we have a person going to be filling that position once we get them fully trained. So we've been very fortunate. Okay. And the other thing that's important to remember also, for Contractor State Licensing Board, your licensing and enforcement system is completely separate from DCA's. So The IT staff here, they manage, they control it, they do all of it. They don't do anything for OIS, and OIS does not do anything for them. So when we get to R3, we're going to be dependent on the IT staff at CSLB to make that conversion and the cutover happen. Okay. And that's why it's critical that we get fully staffed and start planning that now, which we are, and making that happen.
Great. Can you explain how the staff is working? So you have you, Jason. Can you explain what you're doing, what Jason's doing, and what your vacant position and Jason's vacant?
The organizational, how we're doing it now is, as most of you know, I was the manager over the IT at Contractors State Licensing Board, and Jason was over the technical support section, Contractors State Licensing Board. We both accepted positions over at the Department of Consumer Affairs. However, we still come here at least one day a week, and we manage the functions of the IT unit. In addition, though, we are recruiting for Jason's position, and that's the supervisor position, to fill that. We should have the final second set of interviews this Friday, so we should make a selection next week sometime. Okay. And then that relationship will continue as long as the board is okay with that reporting relationship, how we are doing that.
I think it's great.
Great.
Don't
Any
lose
questions?
Jason.
Pardon?
Don't lose Jason.
No. He's not going to go anywhere.
Any other questions, comments?
Great. Thank you.
All right, I think that's turn over then to Steve to review our tentative schedule.
December 11th is the next board meeting. I wanted to have it in that Norwalk Doubletree. We haven't been able to get a hold of them. It'll be somewhere in Orange County area, so I'm not exactly sure what the city is. I think the holiday luncheon down there might be the 12th. Originally, I wanted to have it on the 11th so we could go there during the board meeting, but I'll let you know about that. Anyway, December 11th. February 26th, somewhere in the Bay Area. I'd like to have our strategic planning session in San Diego. We'll have to wait and see how the November election goes. That might impact travel. And then June 11th, we're going to be meeting with the Nevada board again in Orange County. So that's our tentative schedule. Any questions? We will be having some committee meetings between now and December 11th.
All right, one thing, just take a second. I attended a city council meeting in the city of Carson, and the meeting started at 6:30, and my item on the agenda came up at 2:30 in the morning, and they recessed at 4:30 in the morning. So at just under 2.5 hours, we're doing way okay. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded?
Second.